So in this module we're going to focus on setup and writing our files. So what I've done first of all is at the very top here you can see our import commands. And there's two commands we're going to need to import in order to do reading and writing. This one you should recognize, java.util.scanner. This is the same library that we import when we want to do console input. The real reason is because we're basically going to be doing the same thing. The only difference is this time we're not reading it from the console, we're reading it from a file. The import java.io.star, that is going to be used for writing files. And this one's a little bit more complex. Writing is not done the same way we write to a console, so we are going to have to stretch out outside of our comfort zone for a few minutes. Now just to set up some dummy data, what I've done is I've created two arrays. I've created an array of string called names, which holds four names, Jane, Jill, John, and Jack. And a string array of phone numbers, which holds the phone numbers for each of those four people. So these are parallel arrays. Index 0 would apply for Jane and 555-1234. So Jane's phone number is 555-1234. And then I have this other little variable over here called output. I'm going to be using that just to read in some extra data, which I'll get into in a little bit. Notice that all these variables are static. They're not static because I'm doing file I/O. They're static because this is a standard Java program and I'm going to be using these variables inside of my main. So they need to be static in order to be used in there. Alright, let's focus on writing a file. So what I've done is I've created a subprogram to do this. And this subprogram steps through the process of actually setting up a file, opening a file, retrieving the data, and storing that data back into variables. And that's the important thing. You need to store it in variables so you can actually use the data. You don't want to use it while you're reading it in because that could be time intensive and you could actually be doing a lot of extra work here. So in my subprogram, I've set it up to return a boolean, and that boolean is basically true if it successfully wrote the file, false if it failed to write the file. This allows us to do a lot of things such as inform the user whether it was successful or failure. Secondly, I have two parameters, the name of my file and this interesting little boolean variable called append, and we'll get into that in a minute. So let's talk about setup. So to do file writing, we're going to need two object variables, a file writer object, we're just going to call it fwriter, and a print writer object, we're just going to call it writer. Now fwriter is all about opening the file. Print writer is all about writing to that file, but we're going to need both of them. So what we're going to do is inside of our try block, this is where our big problems are going to occur. If we can successfully open our file, we're okay. So that's what's going to go inside of our try block. So inside of the try block, I'm going to say try and open the supplied file. So fwriter equals new file writer, file name. So whatever file name that I supplied. Now in my example, I called it testfile.txt. It's a text file. So I could actually manually open it up in Notepad and surprise, surprise, it looks just like this. Now, what does this line actually do? It successfully, well hopefully successfully, opens the file for potential writing commands. It doesn't actually do any writing yet, it just opens it and preps it. It says, yep, I'm good to go. This append command, this is the interesting one. So this is that boolean that's passed in as a parameter. If that boolean has the value true, what will happen is when I go to write data onto this file, instead of erasing the file and starting from scratch, it will actually write to the end of the file. So the next line will start right here at the very end. It'll just continue on. So that's what append, it means append to the end. So if that's true, it's going to continue on and just add to what's there. That may not be what you want. It depends on the type of program you're building. If you're building like a journal or something like that, or a form, message form or something like that, yeah, that would make sense because you want to maintain all of the entries. You don't want to overwrite the old ones. However, if you're doing something like a high scoreboard, you want to kind of clear it out and start it over again. What we're building in our little program is just a basic little contact book, or like a friend list or something like that. So when we call this, I'm going to set append to false. So write file, this test file with an append value of false, which means we are not going to append, we're going to start it over from scratch. Great. So as long as that's successful, it's going to go on and continue with the rest of the program, which we'll get to in a second. However, if it fails, I'm going to return a false. I'm going to say, nope, this whole thing is broken. Do not do this code below. So if I return, it's immediately going to just ignore all this code and go back to what called this subprogram, which is way up here. If it returns a false, it's going to output the line, sorry, your file was not saved due to an unknown error. Please make sure the file is not already open. Chances are if you're writing to a file, the only reason it's not going to write to a file is that the file is already opened by another program, and maybe it's being read in or something along those lines. So that would definitely cause an error. Now, what if the file doesn't exist? Well, the write file object that we create over here, the fwriter, if the file doesn't exist, testfile.txt, it will actually create a brand new file and start from scratch. So you're actually okay with that. You don't have to worry about that type of problem. That won't give you an error in any way. Alright, so let's assume that the file was opened successfully. So then we go on to step 4. Step 4 is actually writing the data. Or sorry, step 4, I apologize. Step 4 is first setting up the print writer. So the print writer is the object that's going to allow us to write to the file the same way that we write to the console. So normally we do like system.out.println and then whatever text we want to do it. What we're going to do is we're going to create this print writer object using the fwriter. So it needs to know which file it's going to be writing into. Once we've created this object, it's then going to allow us to write to it the same way we write to a console. So instead of writing system.out.println, we just write writer.println, and then whatever we want to write to the file. So if I do println, it's going to write one whole line and then take the cursor and put it onto the next line, which is why we get this is line 1, and then on the very next line we get this is line 2, as we see here. Now, this is just this file doesn't really mean a whole lot. I'm just demonstrating all the different ways to actually read and write to files. So don't take it too seriously or anything like that. So now that I have that, the next thing I want to do is I want to write out my phone book, all my names and all my phone numbers, and I'm going to separate each one of those pieces of data with a comma. So what's going to look like? It's going to look like Jane, comma, phone number, Jill, comma, phone number, John, comma, phone number, Jack, comma, phone number. So in one simple println command, I'm going to put out both the name, the comma, and the phone number, all of it. So I just did a simple for loop that goes through the entire array and just outputs each element one at a time. Now remember, we're not printing to the console this time. We're actually printing to the print writer object. So assuming all that worked out, great, we're done. All we have to do is say, hey, we're all done with this file. Something else is now allowed to use it. So we just call the command writer.close, and that closes the file and allows other programs to have access to it. Other programs, including our own program as well. And then this means that we successfully wrote to the file, so we can return a true. Nothing happens up here when we return true. It just carries on with the program. This code here, this will actually write to the file, and if it's successful, it will just continue on. If it's not successful, if it's a return to false, then it outputs our error statement. So that's writing to a file. So what we've created is a system that looks just like this. This is line 1, this is line 2, and then our four names and phone numbers sequentially. In the next video, what we're going to do is we're going to figure out how to read that data back in and then store it in the appropriate variables so we can actually use it. Maybe we're going to use it to display or whatnot. If I run the program right now, you'll see down here at the bottom, it actually displayed. You'll notice that it displayed this is line 1 and this is line 2 on the same line. Well, I'll show you how that works and why that happened in the next video.